8 days. That is how long Formula One has before the lights go out at Albert Park. 8 days before Melbourne exposes every secret, every bluff, and every lie that has been building in this paddock since Bahrain. And right now, there are a lot of lies. For rival manufacturers spent weeks planning a political trap to slow Mercedes down. They had the votes. They had the technical argument. They were certain. And then Toto Wolff looked across the room and said 2 words. Be our guest. That was the moment the trap closed, on the wrong teams. And Mercedes heads to Melbourne with their engine completely untouched. But that is only the beginning of what is happening right now. Because while that political war was playing out, Ferrari quietly built something in Bahrain that has never existed in Formula One history. A rear wing that physically rotates 270 degrees. Their own team principal gave it a nickname. He called it the Macarena. And it could be the weapon that decides who wins at Albert Park. And Red Bull? James Vowles, the Williams team principal, went on F1 TV and caught them. He said publicly, Red Bull had a seriously powerful engine. And then, the moment people started talking about it, they turned it down. Deliberately. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which team is hiding the most performance heading into Melbourne, which team just scored the biggest political win in modern F1 history, and the one detail about Mercedes that nobody in mainstream media is saying out loud. Stay with me. This gets darker before it gets clearer. Let me explain what actually happened, because most channels got this story wrong. The 2026 technical regulations set a maximum compression ratio of 16:1. Under Article C 5.4.3, that limit was always measured cold, at ambient temperature. The problem? Once a Formula One engine reaches operating temperature, 130 degrees Celsius, thermal expansion inside the combustion chamber physically alters the geometry. The ratio stretches beyond the legal ceiling under real race conditions. Rivals believed Mercedes had engineered this gap deliberately. The suspected combustion output of the Mercedes power unit? Above 420 kilowatts, approximately 570 horsepower. And the paddock estimate of the lap time advantage from this compression gap alone? 0.3 seconds per lap. Every single lap. To put that in perspective, 0.3 seconds is the gap between pole position and row 3 at Albert Park this year. If this advantage is real, Melbourne is already decided before the lights go out. So Ferrari, Audi, and Honda drafted a rule change. They wanted engines tested at 130 degrees operating temperature. They called for a formal FIA vote. They were certain they had the numbers. And then Toto Wolff responded. On record. In front of the entire paddock. Be our guest. We agree to both hot and cold measurements. Not resistance. Not legal threats. Welcome. And that response sent every rival garage into panic. Because if Mercedes passes both tests, the advantage doesn't come from where they thought, it comes from somewhere else they haven't found yet. The FIA conducted the e-vote. A majority voted to tighten the rule wording. The new hot measurement protocol was confirmed. But here is the detail that changes Melbourne completely. The new rule does not take effect until June 2026, after round 13. Mercedes heads to Albert Park, to China, to Japan, with their current engine. Completely untouched. No modifications. No performance reduction. The rivals built a trap. Mercedes turned it into a half-season head start. And this is not a new pattern from Brackley. In 2020, Mercedes introduced the DAS system, dual-axis steering, which allowed drivers to physically adjust front-wheel alignment at 300 km per hour. The FIA banned it after one season. Mercedes had already used it to win the championship. Same playbook. Different decade. Is Mercedes engineering genius, or are rivals simply not keeping up? Ferrari or Mercedes, whose side are you on for Melbourne? Drop it in the comments right now. Now forget everything you think you know about Ferrari's 2026 car. Because what they brought to Bahrain goes far beyond better traction. Ferrari dropped an aerodynamic bomb, and Melbourne may be exactly where it detonates. They built a rear wing that physically rotates 270 degrees. The full upper element flips, completely inverting on the straights to eliminate drag, then closes to full downforce in under 400 milliseconds. Fred Vasseur called it the Macarena in press conferences and the paddock picked it up immediately. This was independently analyzed by Dominic Belasco, a former Sauber aerodynamicist, using real CFD simulation. His findings: during each rotation sequence, there is intense vortex shedding that creates continuous structural stress on the wing. Ferrari's solution was to significantly stiffen the structure, which adds weight high on the car and raises the center of gravity. A deliberate trade-off. Straight line gain for a small cornering cost. Now think about Albert Park. This year, The circuit has 5 active straight-line speed zones, up from the traditional 4. 5 zones where active aerodynamics engage and straight-line speed becomes decisive. The Macarena wing was built for exactly this kind of circuit. And Sam Collins confirmed what makes rivals truly nervous. This mechanism is integrated directly into Ferrari's gearbox architecture. To copy it, rivals would need to rebuild their gearbox from scratch. That is not a development update. That is a new car. Ferrari also introduced an aerodynamic plate near the exhaust outlet, manipulating exhaust gas flow to improve underfloor performance in slow corners. And a larger exhaust flap around the rear crash structure that required specific FIA approval before it could run. After the flap was introduced, the data showed tire wear improved significantly and the car became measurably more stable mid-corner. The numbers confirm the package works. Charles Leclerc set the fastest lap of the entire second Bahrain test, 1 minute 31.992 seconds. In the 0 to 200 km/h acceleration analysis, Ferrari was a full 1 second faster than the field in specific runs. 1 second. Before the first braking zone. And Lewis Hamilton heads to Melbourne more connected to this Ferrari than at any point in his time at the team. His involvement in developing the SF26 means the car reflects his preferences directly. Will Buxton said it publicly, Hamilton never lost his ability. The previous car simply wasn't built for how he drives. The SF26 has changed that. The bookmakers have noticed. Hamilton's championship odds shortened to 8-1 after Bahrain. Ferrari second favorite for the constructors at 3-1. On X, one fan post with over 200 views predicted Hamilton finishing 7th this season. Based on the SF26 data from Bahrain, that prediction was outdated before the test even finished. Is Hamilton genuinely a championship threat in Melbourne, or is this Ferrari testing energy that fades when racing begins? Comment below. I want your honest call. Now let me tell you what happened with Red Bull, and why it matters more than any lap time heading into Melbourne. Red Bull completed 329 laps across the second Bahrain test. Verstappen's fastest was a 1 minute 33.109 seconds, over 1 second off Leclerc's benchmark. Quiet. Calm. Apparently ordinary. And then James Vowles spoke. The Williams team principal went directly on F1 TV and said, "There are games being played. Red Bull looked really good until we spoke about their power unit. Then they've turned it down quite a bit since then." That is not paddock rumor. That is a rival team principal making a specific, on-camera accusation. Here is the technical context. Under the 2026 regulations, the power unit is a 50-50 split between internal combustion and electric power. The MGUH has been removed. Energy harvesting and deployment efficiency is now as decisive as raw horsepower. If Red Bull's Ford-built system has solved that balance better than anyone, that is the most valuable competitive secret in Formula One today. And you do not show that in Bahrain. You save it for qualifying. Verstappen himself said, "It has been honestly incredible, these guys started from zero and gave us a power unit that is running well. No smoke. No failures. No emergency engine swaps." Compare that to what is happening inside the Mercedes garage right now, and you start to understand why Melbourne qualifying will be the most revealing session of the year. Something is wrong inside Mercedes. And it cannot be hidden much longer. In Bahrain testing, Mercedes discarded 2 power units. 2 separate engines. 2 completely different failure modes. Before a single competitive lap of 2026 had been run. Paddock insider Roberto Chinchero reported it directly. They threw 2 engines in the trash due to 2 different issues. Under 2026 allocation rules, engines are not disposable. Every failure has consequences that compound across the season. And there is a second layer. A paddock source told Chinchero that Mercedes may have homologated their race fuel at the last possible moment, and the fuel choice forced them to sacrifice engine performance to complete the approval. In a championship where the margin between McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull and Mercedes is measured in hundredths, that is not a tactical compromise. That is a structural problem. Albert Park puts engines under real pressure. High speed. Long straights. Heat. If Mercedes already lost 2 engines in controlled testing conditions, the question inside the Brackley garage right now is not how to win in Melbourne. It is whether to push the engine at all. George Russell, who praised the power unit at the Barcelona shakedown, adjusted his language by the end of Bahrain. He said Red Bull's deployment edge had, quote, closed drastically compared to the Mercedes-powered teams. Closed drastically is not dominance. And if Mercedes runs a conservative engine map in Melbourne, rivals will sense it immediately. Then Verstappen said this, with a visible smirk, any good team with a Mercedes engine will do well. Is that praise? Or is that a four-time world champion publicly applying psychological pressure on a team he knows is managing internal fear? Melbourne will answer. Now let me bring all of this together, because everything I have just told you about Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull converges in one place. Albert Park, Melbourne. The 2026 Australian Grand Prix. March 14th to 16th, Round 1 of the World Championship. And this is not just another season opener. This is arguably the most important Australian Grand Prix since the sport moved there in 1996. Here is why. The 2026 regulations represent the biggest technical reset in modern Formula One history. Smaller cars. Lighter chassis. A completely restructured power unit. A 50-50 combustion to electric split. The MGUH gone entirely. Active aerodynamics replacing traditional DRS. This is not an evolution of what came before. It is a different sport built on the same tarmac. Melbourne is the first moment where every variable that testing kept hidden becomes unavoidable. Equal fuel loads mandated by regulation. Full power unit modes engaged. Energy management under genuine race pressure, not controlled test conditions. Qualifying on Saturday will be the first honest performance comparison Formula One has had in this entire new era. And Albert Park itself is a more demanding circuit this year than in any previous season. There are now 5 active straight-line speed zones, up from the traditional 4. Turn 8, which modern F1 cars take flat, presents a specific new danger. Drivers who activate straight-line mode at the apex, while the car is still under lateral load, risk a snap of the rear at over 280 km per hour. Into Melbourne's concrete barriers. The risk-reward calculation at that corner alone will define the race's opening laps. Now, team by team, here is where everyone actually stands going into Melbourne. Ferrari, 324 laps, 0 reliability issues, fastest overall lap. Hamilton and Leclerc both publicly measured but privately optimistic. The Macarena wing decision for Melbourne is still open. It may not race on Saturday given Albert Park's mix of slow and technical sections. But the base car package is the most complete Ferrari has brought to a season opener in years. Mercedes, 432 laps, highest mileage, but 2 discarded engines carrying a shadow. George Russell enters as the bookmaker favorite at 23-10 for the Drivers' Championship. Kimi Antonelli makes his first Australian GP appearance as a Formula One race driver, under maximum pressure, with a rookie seat at the most politically exposed team on the grid. Red Bull, 329 laps, quiet, stable, saying nothing. Max Verstappen and rookie Isaac Hadjar. Hadjar said directly after testing, "I feel as ready as I can heading into Melbourne." For a driver making his Red Bull debut at the most prestigious season opener on the calendar, that is either composure or optimism. Melbourne will tell us which. Aston Martin Honda, and this is where the story gets genuinely dark. Only 128 laps completed in the second Bahrain test. The lowest count on the entire grid by a significant margin. A battery-related Honda power unit failure on Thursday ended Fernando Alonso's session. Lance Stroll completed just 6 laps on Friday. 6 laps. In a 3-day test. A statement from Honda confirmed the battery issue. And the internal consensus inside the Aston Martin camp? Melbourne is already being treated as a write-off. Honda is targeting Round 3, the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, as their earliest realistic recovery point. For Fernando Alonso, one of the most experienced and decorated drivers in the history of this sport, the 2026 season could begin with 2 consecutive painful weekends before it has truly started. Alonso fans, is this already a disaster for Aston Martin, or can they fight through it? Drop your answer in the comments. I will reply to the top ones personally. One more development that matters for Melbourne specifically. A major leadership change is happening at Pirelli, Formula One's tire supplier. Mario Isola, one of the most recognizable faces in the paddock for years, is handing over to Dario Marafusci from March 1st. Melbourne becomes the first Grand Prix under this new regime, on a circuit notorious for tire warm-up difficulty and inconsistent degradation. George Russell himself described Pirelli compounds as, like wizardry, one set is rapid and the next is terrible. Under new management. At a circuit that has historically produced unusual tire behavior. Watch this storyline closely. Fan discussions on X tell you exactly what the wider audience is feeling right now. One post with over 200 views put up a full top 10 prediction after Bahrain testing. Hamilton placed at 7th. Verstappen 2nd. Russell 1st. But the thread is flooded with one question that nobody has answered yet: is Red Bull actually hiding something? Everybody has an opinion. Nobody has proof. Melbourne is where proof arrives. Now, before I give you my Melbourne prediction, let me be completely fair. Because this channel does not trade in hype. We trade in evidence. Is there a fair case for Mercedes? Yes. They completed the most laps of any team in the second Bahrain test, 432 total. Kimi Antonelli set their fastest time at 1 minute 32.803 seconds. George Russell beat Verstappen by 0.021 seconds in the very last minutes of the final session. Bookmakers list Mercedes as constructors' favorite at 11-8. Is Ferrari's pace potentially misleading? Also yes. Gunther Steiner warned that Ferrari historically runs higher engine modes in testing, making them appear stronger than they ultimately prove once racing begins. Ralf Schumacher made the same point independently. And Red Bull sandbagging? Verstappen himself admitted, is it fast enough? I have no idea. We have to wait and see. A driver hiding a genuine advantage does not say that. History gives us important context here. In 2009, Melbourne GP were the fastest in preseason testing and went on to win the Constructors' Championship as complete outsiders. In 2020, Mercedes were conservative throughout testing, and dominated immediately once the season began. The pattern is never consistent. What we do know is this: Melbourne qualifying is the first moment where fuel loads are equalized by regulation, full engine modes are deployed, and teams stop hiding their hand. Every secret that survived Bahrain gets tested under race pressure on that Saturday afternoon. Here is my Melbourne prediction, based on the data, not the noise. Ferrari arrives at Albert Park with the most technically ambitious package on the grid. A rotating wing system that activates across 5 straight-line zones. An exhaust integration rivals cannot replicate. The fastest Bahrain testing lap. And a driver in Hamilton who, for the first time in 2 years, genuinely believes in his car. Mercedes has the political edge. The compression ratio rule is theirs until June. But 2 discarded engines and a fuel homologation performance sacrifice are early warnings that cannot be dismissed. Red Bull silence is the most dangerous variable of all. A brand new engine program, built from nothing, running 329 laps without drama, while the team quietly reduces its visible output the moment attention arrives. That is the behavior of a team that knows exactly what it has, and is saving it for when it matters most. My call for Melbourne: Ferrari locks out the front row on Saturday. Russell is within striking distance. Red Bull qualifies conservatively but races smarter than their grid position suggests. And if Mercedes is forced onto a protective engine map, the psychological shift inside that garage happens immediately. This is a Ferrari and Mercedes title fight, with Red Bull as the variable neither team can fully calculate. If you want the real F1 story, the technical depth, the political reality, the data behind the headlines that others won't show you, subscribe to F1 News Breakdown right now. Hit the notification bell. We cover what every other channel misses. And one last question before you go: after everything in this video, who do you think wins Melbourne? Ferrari, Mercedes, or is this Red Bull's moment to come out of the shadows? Drop your prediction in the comments. I will go through every single reply personally. If this video gave you something the mainstream channels didn't, share it with one person who follows this sport. That is all I ask. This is F1 News Breakdown. See you in Melbourne.